there.
All right. All right. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So, I'm excited to be here with Debbie Smith, who is the Senior Director of Customer Education at Visier. And so, as we all know, in education, no matter what type of education you're doing, whether it be L&D or customer ed, learning isn't just about knowing something. It's about doing that thing that you're learning about. And so, what we like to say here at Bongo, it's not just about the what or the how, it's the why you're doing something. And so, in my opinion, and I hopefully Debbie's opinion, a lot of people's opinion, the best way to do this and capture this knowledge is with practical assessments. So today, Debbie and I are going to be discussing what practical assessments are, the benefits of having them, and how to overcome some blockers for integrating them into your programs. So Debbie, I think anyone who might be joining us today from the customer education world is likely already very familiar with you and the work that you've done. But for those that aren't, let's just take a minute to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Debbie Smith, and as Emily said, I'm the Senior Director of Visier University, and I'm also the President of SEDMA, the Customer Education Management Association. I've been in education for more years than I really care to remember at this point in my life, and I've done all types of education, literally educating people from the ages of 5 to my oldest student was 99. So I've covered the full spectrum, and I've done both traditional education, virtual education in the public schools, and then also moved into corporate life where I've done L&D, customer education, and a little bit of sales enablement too. So really education, you can tell, is a passion. And I often say, I have a learning problem. I can't stand to not know something. So I'm one of those people, you send me some research and I'm going to dig into the research and actually understand how the research was even done. So that's really my thing, is a learning problem.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, talking about research, I think you've really made your mark with your research and implementation of certification programs. So before we dive into defining, what practical assessments mean to you, since they typically live under the certification or credential umbrella, I was hoping we could just take a moment to break down the different types of credentials. And as you go through these, it would be great if you could touch on, how organizations typically decide which to offer.
Yeah, sure. So there's really two different types of certificates that we use, right? And it's really confusing because we use the word certificate for two different things. We use it for certification and for certificates of completion. Right? And so that makes it really, really confusing for people. So certification actually in the US has some real defined practices that you're supposed to follow to call it a certification. And you'll hear people call it a high stakes certification. I don't even consider it really high stakes because most of what we're doing, let's be real, is not high stakes. Most of what we're doing and we're talking about is really tech certifications, which are important because they help people get a job. The other type certificate is a certificate of completion. And the certificate of completion, we a lot of times now award badges for those. And so if you're doing badges for both, you need to separate them out and think about a certification badge and then come up with another name for your other badges. I typically call them skills badges. And quite honestly, I stole that from Slack. They were doing it. And I think, you watch some of the other companies and you learn from them. And I learn a lot by watching what my peers are doing and talking to my peers at other companies. And it's just important to set a full strategy for it so that you don't get into problems where you're calling something a certification that it's not. Because when you do that, it actually creates problems that you don't even anticipate. And I've gone into 3 different companies that had those types of certifications and had to redo them. And when I've redone them, the customers actually sent me emails thanking me for doing it, because customers recognize the difference in a real certification versus a certificate of completion being awarded as. So you're really doing your company, your customers, and yourself a favor if you separate them right from the beginning. And when do you look at doing them? Well, if you don't have the full time to build out a certification program, which can actually very easily be done in 3 months. I've proven that over and over. Typical time, people will tell you is 18 months to do it. You don't have time to do anything in 18 months. That's
Right.
that, right? But certificates of completion and skills badges, you can build off of the current content you have by adding an assessment to it. And the best type of assessment to add to it, really, for a certificate of completion, I believe, is some type of practical assessment. So that's how I like to do it. And I would also love to do certifications as a practical assessment. I think there's valid reasons to do multiple choice knowledge questions, but I think you need a combination of the knowledge and the practical hands-on assessment.
That's great. And that directly leads to my next question, which is, how would you define practical assessment, and what is the value of offering this type of assessment over what you just mentioned, maybe a more traditional multiple choice exam?
So a multiple choice exam verifies that you know the material, right? But it actually doesn't verify that you can do and execute. And we all know that when people can actually do and execute, it's different than having knowledge. Lots of people can talk about things, but being able to actually do the thing is different. So I think the practical assessment, especially in software, is huge. And practical assessments have always sort of been the holy grail. I think the first one that, well, I know the first one that I actually took was a Microsoft certification back in 2010. And they had a practical assessment back then that was actually hands-on. So you were actually in Word doing it. And back then, when I started getting into certification and doing my own, I actually contacted Microsoft and tried to buy the platform that they were using, and they're like, nope, proprietary, we're not selling it. So it's something I've been looking for a long time.
Okay, great. So yeah, you mentioned kind of getting kind of a hands-on lab. I think some people could see it as a role play. I'm trying to think of, projects, live demos, so simulations. I think those are typically what we tend to see, right, with
Yes.
practical assessments.
And to me, those are all hands-on, right? Because you really have to, when you do a presentation, it's not just the back and forth. You also have to present something. So you have to actually create something.
Yeah.
So it's more than just talking, because if you're just talking, then you're really only getting the knowledge piece. So you need to make sure they're doing something hands-on. So yes, creating it, whether it's in-app, whether it's a presentation, really it's all of those.
Okay. So, at least in my experience, I think we all understand the value of practical assessments, but I don't think we see lots of organizations actually doing them. So what do you think is the blocker for kind of including these types of assessments?
So the blocker is if you don't have, so I'm a Bongo user, right? So I have Bongo now, so I can do it with Bongo. But prior to that, the way I had to create practical assessments was sort of convoluted, and it works, but we would sort of hide Easter eggs in the application, so that if you actually took all the right steps and did the things correctly, you would see something on screen. So then we'd ask a multiple choice question about that thing that you were seeing on screen. So we had that type, or we would have people in a room actually doing something in product or doing role play, and then, or even doing it virtually as we switched to more virtual. But then you had the problem of you have to have assessors, you have to have people watching and doing it. And in order to really keep the scoring fair, you have to have multiple assessors, and then you have to, and we call them raters, and we have to do both inter and intra-rater reliability to make sure that everyone's assessing things the same, and so there's a lot of training and maintenance and upkeep to that. So having something where you could have AI do that for you, that's going to be consistent and not going to have the bias of different people, is a huge win.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's typically what we see, that people maybe want to do this, but they're so resource strapped, they don't have the time or the resources to to get those reviewers in and be watching that feedback. So I think automation and, you know, the ability to scale those assessments is really key. And, you know, I think it's kind of a mix of people maybe not attempting to do it because of all of the resources that are tied to it. So hopefully with the technology that's out there right now, people can start thinking about this. And, you know, you mentioned Bongo, thank you, but, you know, are there other kind of benefits to integrating these types of assessments? So, you know, is it just having that artifact of what people can do? Is it more on the learner side of really kind of doing, you know, make sure that you know it perfectly? What are kind of the benefits of?
It's a really good question, because not only is there a benefit to the learner who gets to say, yes, I proved that I could do it, but to hiring managers and even your own managers, who these people may work for, when they take a certification and it's knowledge based and it's multiple choice, unless your exam's been around for a long time and has, you know, the recognition like the PMP from the Project Management Institute has, like, people know what that one is. People know Oracle certifications. Other certifications from smaller companies, people don't know what they are. So when a manager knows that you've actually gone through a practical assessment, it gives them more confidence. And this becomes even more important when you're talking with partner organizations and trying to certify partners, seeing that they can actually do it. And the managing partners of the company that at the individual partner companies, they really, really appreciate having that hands-on assessment, because it gives them more confidence in their personnel. So that's a huge win for it. It's setting these up and, you know, getting the buy-in, to put all the executive buy-in to really set the resourcing is the hardest part.
Yeah.
So, you know, looking for easier ways to do this is a huge, huge thing that people are doing.
Yeah. So, you know, that was actually going to be my next question. So for anyone who's listening or has been wanting to do this, I feel like there's probably two groups of people. Some who are still building a program from the ground up and maybe want to integrate this, and maybe those who have well-defined programs who want to start introducing this and are like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna introduce this now when everything is kind of running smoothly? So I guess for those two groups, how could they sort of build a business case and deliver that to their leadership to say, you know, this is the type of assessment that we want to introduce?
So there's the research that I always quote is the Red Hat study. The IDC and Red Hat did a research report that's, I don't even remember what year it was now. It was quite a few years ago, but there's some data in that report, and that PDF is still online, and you can pull down the PDF on it. But it gives a lot of real concrete impact that their certification had. And so when you layer the practical on top of certification, you're really giving the next boost. And it built, we know that people who are certified submit less support tickets. And when they do submit support tickets, their support tickets are the things that are pushing your company to the next level, because they're really trying to innovate on your platform. We know that they become champions of your company. So you're going to be stickier at their company. And what we also know is if they leave, they have a greater likelihood to bring you into a new company. So not only does it affect your current tech stack, it affects future sales. So it's really a huge win to do it right. So making the business case really starts with looking at data and finding data from the other companies. And, you know, everyone likes to look at the big companies. So if you pull the data from the big companies and they all post it online so you can find it and do that research and post that research, that's what I find really has the biggest impact. And then the other thing is to find out what's most important to the execs that you're talking to. You know, every exec has their OKRs, but they also have their personal thing that they really usually want to talk to. So if you can speak to them specifically about the one piece of data that's important to them rather than all the data that's out there, that's really going to help you win your business case, because you have to customize it a little bit depending on who your C-suite is that you're talking to. And every one of them has slightly different things that they're focused on. So really focusing on who your listener is.
No, that's great. And then just to kind of circle back, and you touched on this in the beginning, but when you talk about these types of hands-on assessments, do you think it fits under all of the, certification, completion, and badges, or does it fit kind of under one bucket more than the other?
That's why it's really cool, is it actually fits across all of them. Mm-hmm. And you can, if you think of the whole thing as a program, so a certificate of completion might have one level. It might have a really prescriptive project that they're doing. You get into a certification, it's probably going to be a little bit more complex. It's going to be a bigger use case. So you can build on it and actually stack all of these things together. So you can stack your badges and your credentials and your certifications. And then you can even do different tiers of certification and stack them all together. And if each one of those has a practical assessment that sort of builds on the skills of the other, then it's a really good way to make your whole program cohesive.
That's great. That's great advice. So yeah, I mean, I think that we touched on everything that we wanted to do today, which is what are practical assessments, what are the value that they can bring to, to your programs. And I think probably most importantly for people, how you can make that business case to start introducing them. So, I think like we talked about, a lot of companies, a lot of programs hesitate due to the scalability and the effort of that manual feedback and watching those videos, or standing over someone's shoulder to see that they can actually do their job and integrate it into their workflow. But I think with the right approach, and like you mentioned, leveraging automation and focusing on impact for your leadership, I think that we can all kind of work to make learning more effective and drive real business results. So thanks so much, Debbie, as always, for all of your insights today.
Happy to help. And one other thing that I did want to mention.
Yeah.
We'd be remiss to not talk about how AI is going to affect certification and practical assessments.
Yeah.
There are bots out there that can take exams for you. Right? So, and the bots are getting good enough that it's really even hard to tell right now, even in a certification, in a proctored exam sometimes, if there's some bot helping. And I think that's going to become a bigger. But if someone's actually doing a practical assessment and you're seeing them through video, the AI is seeing them and seeing what they're doing on screen at the same time as they're talking through it, I think it's going to be a way to actually discern who the humans are versus the bots. And I think that's going to be a big thing going forward. It's something I'm starting to hear people talk about.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we talk about AI taking over, and this is sort of putting the human back into it and putting the spotlight on the actual person a lot more. So I think for people who are scared that AI is going to take over, this is the way for people to really prove their value and what they can do. And we actually just had a question come in. So when scoping a knowledge check or cert assessment, where would you start? Creating the content that the exam would be based on, or build the exam and create content based on that?
That's a great question. It depends on which one you're doing. So the first thing you have to really do is start with a task analysis, a job task analysis, and identify what it is that someone needs to know or do. So often we develop content and then we write the exam, and we really should be starting with those objectives, which I twist all of my tasks into objectives so that way they're all related, and making sure we're testing those. So I would start with that. Now, if I'm doing a certification, honestly, I don't start with the content. If I'm doing a skills badge, I start with developing the content. And the reason that it's different is because a certification isn't tied to a training course. So you can give a list of documentation, knowledge-based articles, community articles. So you don't have to have that. And they can also come with pre-knowledge. So really, it depends on which one you're doing.
No, that's a great answer. And yeah, I think that wraps us up for today. So if anyone has any other questions for Debbie, you can find her on LinkedIn. She's very responsive, loves to talk about this stuff, or you can reach out to me. But thanks everybody for joining today. And thanks so much, Debbie.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Emily.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.